There's a village that doesn't appear on modern maps, tucked between crumbling moors and black pines near the edge of Derbyshire. Locals still call it Croft Hollow, but if you ask around long enough, you'll learn that no one really lives there anymore. At least, not by choice. The last census marked the population at 3, but the postman swears he hears 4 voices behind the door of the vicarage. The story begins in the winter of 1791. Reverend Isaac Fell arrived in Croft Hollow under heavy fog and heavier silence. He'd been appointed by the parish council after the previous clergyman, Father Whittock, vanished. No farewell sermon, no last rites, no note. The only thing he left behind was a leather-bound volume locked inside his writing desk. No title, no author, just a clasp of iron that burned the fingertips of the man who first tried to open it. The council warned Reverend Fell to leave it be. Whittock was unwell, they said. His writings wandered. But Isaac wasn't the type to fear a book. Croft Hollow was small. 8 homes, a crumbling stone chapel, a graveyard that dipped into the hillside like a sinking mouth. People spoke little and always with eyes on the trees. They told Isaac not to wander the hollow after dusk. They told him not to ring the chapel bell at night. They told him never, under any circumstance, to touch the book in the desk. He laughed. "Books don't bite," he said. But that was before the first dream. On the 7th night, Isaac woke in a sweat. He couldn't remember the dream itself, only the feeling of being watched and the echo of a voice that didn't speak with sound but with pressure, like thunder behind a wall. He walked to the study in a daze. He didn't remember unlocking the desk. But there it was, the book. Open, waiting. On the first page, in fresh ink that glistened under candlelight, was a line written, and in an old hand, "Let the bell toll once for each who turned the page." And Isaac turned the page. Some books don't want to be read, they want to be obeyed. The moment Reverend Fell turned that page, a low hum began to vibrate through the chapel walls. It wasn't coming from the wind. It came from the bell tower. But the bell hadn't swung in years. The rope had rotted and snapped long ago. The last man to try repairing it had fallen from the rafters and shattered his spine. So when it tolled that night, deep, slow, one perfect ring, Isaac froze. He hadn't touched a thing, except that page. He slammed the book shut, locked it back in the desk, and convinced himself it had all been a trick of the wind, of the nerves, of the wine he drank before bed. Nothing supernatural, nothing unholy. But when he stepped outside the next morning, the villagers were already gathered in the lane, silent, pale, all eyes on him. An old woman, Margaret Bly, the candlemaker's widow, stepped forward and said without greeting, "Who rang it?" He said nothing. She nodded once, sadly. Then it's begun again. That night, Isaac found something new beneath his pillow. A page torn from a funeral ledger. Blank, except for one name written in coal-black ink. Isaac Fell, date of death, not yet written. And on the reverse side, the same handwriting as the book. One page turned, one bell rung, one marked. The dreams came back, louder, darker. Now he could make out shapes in the shadows behind his eyes. A figure standing at the edge of the woods, face wrapped in burlap, hands bent backwards like broken branches. The figure never moved closer, but it was always there, watching, waiting. And every morning, a new page from the funeral book appeared somewhere in the chapel, always blank, always with the same line on the back. 2 pages, 2 names. Keep reading. Isaac told himself he'd burn the book, but deep down, he already knew it wouldn't burn, and he wouldn't stop. The book doesn't open doors, it lets things in. By the 3rd week, Isaac had read 5 pages. Not all at once. The book wouldn't allow that. The clasp would unlock only once per night, and every time he opened it, it felt a little less like a choice. He'd come to in his study, candle burned low, ink on his fingertips, but no memory of reading. And each time, that cursed bell rang overhead. Same dreadful sound, low, long, final. It wasn't just the bell. The village itself began to change. Chickens stopped laying, dogs howled at windows that hadn't been opened. The blacksmith's boy wandered into the chapel mid-sermon, eyes rolled white, and whispered, "The hollow's opening again." Then he collapsed. Isaac visited the widow Bly, hoping for answers. She poured tea that smelled of salt and root water, and told him the truth. "You weren't the first to read it," she said. "Wittek wasn't either." She pulled something from her drawer, a slip of parchment dated 1647. The bell book was found beneath the altar, buried in clay, chained shut. Every priest who's turned its pages thinks they can finish it, but no one's ever reached the end. That night, Isaac opened the book again. This time the ink bled as he read, like the letters were still wet or still being written. The next funeral page was waiting for him, pinned to the chapel door by a nail that hadn't been there hours earlier. This one bore two names: Mrs. Eliza Turnley, dead by fire; Edgar Turnley, still breathing. He dropped the paper and ran to the Turnley home. Too late. Eliza was found curled in the hearth. No sign of smoke in the house, no burns on the floor. Just her, ash-gray and smiling. Isaac asked Edgar what had happened. The boy, only 6, said, "She read out loud last night. She said the name again." He was listening, and when Isaac asked who he was, the boy only pointed to the woods. "Some names aren't spoken. They're summoned." The boy hadn't just pointed at the woods. He pointed at a place just beyond the tree line, where no path ran and no animals wandered. The villagers called it Dead Mile. No one tilled the land there, no graves were dug in its soil, no birds sang above it. Isaac had seen it on his first walk through the hollow, but only as a distant patch of darkness in an already gray world. Now, it felt like the center of everything. That night the book refused to open. No matter how Isaac pulled, twisted, or begged, the iron clasp held tight. So he left the study door open and tried to sleep. He lasted 2 hours, because just before dawn, a new sound echoed from the bell tower. Not a toll, a scrape, metal dragging on stone. He climbed the chapel stairs, candle in hand, and found the bell had turned. Not swung, turned, rotated fully around on its bracket, facing backward. And inside the mouth of the bell, etched in perfect script, were words that hadn't been there yesterday. "Call him by his name, and the hollow will speak back." Beneath that, scrawled in blood-red ink, "He remembers you now, Isaac." Back in his study, the book sat wide open, pages fluttering, ink bleeding. At the top of the newest page was a single sentence: "Do not write his name, not even to remember." And yet, the bottom half of the page had already been filled in, not by Isaac, but by a shaking hand that resembled his own: N. H. Vale. The name wasn't complete, but he recognized its shape, its weight. It wasn't English, wasn't Latin. It was older. That night, Isaac dreamt of the figure again, this time not standing at the edge of the woods, but standing behind him. And in the dream it whispered, 6 bells, 2 more to wake the hollow. Then we walk again. The book doesn't demand sacrifice, it collects what it's owed. Isaac no longer left the chapel. The villagers stopped coming. The Turnley boy vanished the morning after the bell turned. No one searched. Even the dogs went quiet. Inside the chapel, the air grew thick and sour, like wet parchment and burnt feathers. The book wouldn't stay shut now. Each time he tried to lock it away, it opened again by dusk, turned to a new page. Waiting. The 7th page bore no name, just a sketch. done in ink and bone char. A tree, twisted, dead, hollow at its base, the same one near the edge of the woods, the place the boy had pointed to, and written beneath the sketch, in handwriting not his own, "Strike the root, bury the name." Isaac returned to the widow Bly. She was weaker now, skin gray, hands trembling. He showed her the page. She didn't touch it. "That tree marks the old gallows," she whispered. "Buried men still hang beneath it. That's where the hollow began." He went that night, shovel in hand. The fog was heavier but not natural. It curled upward like breath from the earth. The tree was exactly as drawn but older, more rotten, and the hollow at its base, wide enough to crawl through. Inside, beneath layers of dead leaves, he found bones. But not human. Not entirely. Jaw too wide, spine too long, fingers curled the wrong way, and clutched between them a pendant, small, silver, etched with one word, vile. As he pulled it free, the bell in the chapel rang. Not once, twice, and from somewhere deep behind him, not in the woods but beneath the tree, he heard it again. The scrape, the crawl, the breath. He turned back to the chapel, pendant clenched in fist, heart racing, and the moment he crossed the threshold, the book slammed shut. The first time it had ever done so on its own. The seventh bell was never meant to ring. Isaac placed the pendant on the altar, still cold in his hand. The moment it touched the stone, the candles went out, all at once, as if exhaled by something massive and unseen. Outside, the wind didn't howl. It whispered. Voices, hundreds of them, tangled like vines. Names half-spoken, pleas unfinished. He clutched the book, hoping it would stay shut. It didn't. A new page, not inked, carved. With the tip of a blade or claw, the words had been gouged into the parchment. 6 have rung. The 7th tolls not for death, but for return. If you speak the name now, the bell will sing his body home. He staggered back. The chapel cracked overhead, beams groaning, rafters warping. The bell tower's shadow seemed to stretch longer than the sun allowed, and then came the sound he feared most, the first rope creak. Even though the bell's rope had rotted decades ago, it was moving, climbing back up into the tower as if being pulled from above or below. He ran to the belfry, and what he saw froze him. The rope had regrown, but it wasn't hemp or fiber. It was hair, twisted, gray, wet, and wrapped around it, tight, like a noose, was a hand. Not living, but not rotted. The fingers twitched once, and the bell let out a sound so deep it didn't echo. It just settled into the bones. Back in the chapel, the book had flipped again. This time the page had no writing, only a name burned into the leather beneath it. Vile. The pendant on the altar shattered, and the air in the chapel dropped to freezing. Isaac fell to his knees, not in prayer, in surrender, because now he understood what Bly meant. The hollow doesn't feed on bodies, it feeds on memory. And he had remembered the name. He had spoken it, even just in thought. That was enough. Outside, the trees began to bend, not from wind, but to make room. The hollow never forgets who woke it. The chapel doors burst open on their own, but it wasn't wind that pushed them. It was return. A slow, cold pressure, like the fog itself, had grown a spine. It crawled in on hands and knees, heavy and wet, dragging the scent of soil that had never known sun. Isaac stood behind the altar, staring at the open book. One final page. No ink, no scratchings, just a small circle drawn in dried blood. Still fresh. Waiting for a name. His. The bell rang once more. The 7th toll. The last time it rang that many, according to Widow Bly's whispers, was in 1647. And that time, the hollow swallowed half the village. This time, it only needed one. The chapel walls began to weep, literal tears leaking from the stone itself. Faces appeared in the wood grain of the pews, some smiling, some screaming. And from the rafters above, a figure descended, not by rope, by bone. A spine, long as a man's height, twisted down like a chain, and at the end of it, him, veil. His face was not flesh. It was parchment, creased, weathered, covered in letters that crawled beneath the skin like ants. His voice, when he spoke, wasn't heard. It was understood. You are the page that writes itself. You turned the 7th, now be the 8th. He reached forward with hands made of ash and ink. Isaac felt his name leave his own lips, not spoken, not screamed, just given freely. The bell didn't ring again. It snapped, and the sound it made as it shattered was the most human thing Isaac had heard in weeks. A cry, a baby's cry, but backwards. Then some. Nothing. Silence. The fog lifted. The book closed, and where Isaac had stood was just a blank page fluttering in the wind. Not all stories are written. Some are lived, over and over. The hollow was quiet again. No more tolling, no more dreams, no more chapel sermons, just wind, grass, time. When spring came, a surveyor from Matlock wandered into the village, looking for stone from the old chapel to repurpose. He expected to find ruins. Instead, he found nothing. No chapel, no bell, no graveyard. Only a hollow patch of land, soft underfoot, with one dead tree at the center, bent like a man in mourning. At its base, a book, closed, untouched, bound in cracked leather. And beside it, a ledger. Inside the ledger, the names of every villager since the 1600s, everyone ever marked by the tolls, were written page by page in perfect script. And the last entry, fell, Isaac, toll, 7th, cause, remembered the name. The surveyor pocketed the ledger, curious. He left the book behind. That night, back in his room above the tavern, the man opened the ledger to read more. He never made it past page 2, because from far across the moor where Croft Hollow once stood, he heard it. The bell, just once. They say the hollow isn't a place, it's a memory, buried in ink, passed down by accident, awakened when someone starts reading out of order. And the devil's book, it doesn't need to be opened to be obeyed, just remembered.